The Capitol Grill receipt fell from Cassandra's purse like a loaded gun hitting the floor. I stared at the crumpled paper, dated last Tuesday when she was supposed to be at her mother's. $340 for two, paid in cash. My hands didn't shake as I slipped it into my jacket pocket. 23 years in military strategic operations had taught me to control such tells. My name is Clayton Mitchell. I'm 48 years old, and I've spent my life planning other people's wars. Now I run Mitchell Consulting, where Fortune 500 companies pay me obscene amounts of money to strategize their corporate battles. The irony of missing the signs in my own home doesn't escape me. The morning after finding the receipt, I maintained my routine. The gym at 0500, protein shake at my desk by 0630, first client call at 0700. The routine had served me well since leaving the service, giving structure to civilian life that most of my fellow veterans struggled to find. From my office on the 32nd floor of the Prudential Tower, Boston spread out before me like a tactical map, the Charles River cutting through it like a strategic barrier. The McKinsey report is on your desk, sir. Linda, my assistant of 7 years, placed a steel gray folder precisely at the corner of my desk. She'd been with me since I started the firm, and her military precision, learned from 20 years as an Air Force secretary, was one of the reasons I'd hired her. Their projection numbers? Off by 12%. I had analytics run them twice. I nodded, already scanning the first page. Get me Robert McKinsey on the phone. Time to explain why his market expansion strategy has more holes than a Taliban hideout after an A-10 run. The day proceeded like any other, except it wasn't. Each email I sent, each call I took, was punctuated by that receipt burning a hole in my pocket. Cassandra and I had met 5 years ago at a charity gala. She was serving on the board of the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation, a position her father had secured for her, and I was there as a major donor. She was 32 now, 16 years my junior. The age gap had never bothered me until recently, when she'd started attending more foundation events than usual. I pulled up my banking app during lunch. Cassandra's spending patterns had shifted 3 months ago. Small at first, extra shopping trips, longer lunches. Then bigger outlays at high-end boutiques where she'd never shopped before. The kind of places where women buy things they want someone special to see. Sir. Linda's voice came through the intercom. Marcus Sullivan is here for your 2 o'clock. Marcus. My oldest friend from the service, now running his own private security firm. I hadn't called him here for a social visit. Send him in. Marcus filled the doorway like he used to fill a Humvee turret. The sleeve of his tailored suit didn't quite hide the edge of his unit tattoo. He didn't bother with pleasantries. You look like you're planning an operation, Clayton. I slid the receipt across my desk. I need surveillance. Professional. Discreet. He picked up the paper, studied it with the same intensity he used to study satellite imagery. Target. My wife. Marcus's face didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly, the same way it used to before we kicked in doors in Fallujah. You sure you want to pull this thread? I looked out at the city again, at all the tiny lives playing out in their tiny dramas below. In our line of work, Marcus, what's the one thing you can't ignore? A breach in security. Exactly. I turned back to him. And I have a breach. Marcus worked fast. Within 48 hours, he had a preliminary report on my desk. The photographs were crisp, professional, surveillance from the kind of equipment that doesn't show up in civilian catalogs. Cassandra at Newberry Street, entering Lavoille at 1:27 p.m. Cassandra leaving at 3:42 p.m., not alone. The man with her stood a head taller than me, tailored suit that probably cost more than a Marine's monthly salary. His hand on the small of her back as he guided her into a black Range Rover. Christopher Hayes, Marcus said, dropping another folder on my desk. Runs Hayes and Associates Event Planning. Does all the high-end charity galas from Boston to Martha's Vineyard. Met your wife 6 months ago at the Children's Hospital Spring Benefit. I flipped through Hayes' financials. He's bleeding money. 3 failed venues in the past year. Word is he's looking for investors. Marcus leaned against my office window, his reflection overlaying the city skyline. You want me to shut this down? Not yet. I studied Hayes' photo. I need to understand the battlefield first. The next morning, I was reviewing security footage from my home system when Linda buzzed in. Tommy Webster is here to see you. The neighbor boy. I checked my watch. 3:45 p.m. Send him up. Tommy was 12, all elbows and untied shoelaces, with the kind of observational skills that either made you a detective or got you punched in middle school. He'd been monitoring our cul-de-sac better than any security camera since his mother banned violent video games. Hey, Mr. Mitchell. He dropped into the chair across from my desk, fidgeting with his backpack strap. Mom said I should tell you about the car. What car, Tommy? The black Range Rover. The one that parks down the street when you're at work. The guy doesn't look like a burglar, but Mom says we should report suspicious activities. He pulled out a notebook, flipped it open. I wrote down the times. And the license plate. And what kind of coffee he gets from Starbucks. I looked at the kid's meticulous notes. Dates, times, even the brand of the driver's sunglasses. Some people would call it nosy. In my line of work, we called it human intelligence. That's good work, Tommy. Very observant. I pulled a $100 bill from my wallet. Keep taking notes. Consider it a private security contract. His eyes went wide. Yes, sir. After Tommy left, I called Marcus. I need eyes on Hayes and Associates. Full spectrum. Already on it. Got something interesting. He's meeting potential investors at the Prudential Center food court tomorrow. Trying to keep it off the radar. What time? Noon. I'll handle this one personally. The next day, I sat at the sushi counter, Wall Street Journal hiding my face, watching Hayes work his magic on two middle-aged men in Brooks Brothers suits. His gestures were animated, confident, the kind of showmanship that dazzled board members' wives at charity functions. But I caught the desperation in his pitch, the slight tremor in his hand as he pushed financial projections across the table. My phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra, working late tonight. Foundation emergency meeting. I watched Hayes check his phone at the same time, a small smile playing at his lips. The Foundation emergency meeting would probably take place at the Four Seasons, room service on Hayes's corporate card. The one that was 3 months behind on payments. Sir. Linda's voice in my earpiece. Your 3 o'clock is here. And Marcus sent over the hotel surveillance footage you requested. Send the client my apologies. Something more urgent just came up. I stood, straightening my tie. Have the footage ready in the conference room. Time to see exactly what kind of emergency meetings my wife had been attending. The conference room became my war room. 3 monitors displayed surveillance footage, financial records, and text message logs. Marcus stood at parade rest, watching me pin timestamps and locations to the digital map of Boston on the main screen. Every hotel meeting, every chance encounter at charity events, every credit card transaction, all forming a pattern that any halfway decent tactical officer could read. Your wife's careful, Marcus said, studying the timeline. Hayes, not so much. He's been moving money around, trying to cover the holes in his business. Last quarter's taxes show he's underwater on 2 properties. I pulled up Hayes and Associates client list. Cross-referenced these with Cassandra's foundation contacts. Find me pressure points. Linda entered with a stack of folders. Attorney Goldman is here, sir. And the forensic accountant sent his preliminary report. Goldman was 65, with the kind of expensive suit that told opponents he'd never lost a case. He surveyed my war room setup with approval. Planning a counteroffensive, Mitchell? Planning the endgame. I handed him the surveillance photos. I need options. He spread the photos across the conference table, methodical as an evidence tech. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but with this documentation. He tapped the Four Seasons receipt. We can pursue a favorable division based on marital misconduct. Your prenup has an infidelity clause? Article 7, paragraph 3. Then we're dealing from strength. He pulled out his phone, checked his calendar. Judge Matthews owes me a favor. We can file under seal, keep it quiet until we're ready to move. Timeline. Give me 48 hours to prepare the paperwork. But Mitchell. He paused, studying my face. You seem remarkably controlled about all this. Emotion is a luxury, counselor. I'm treating this like any other hostile takeover. After Goldman left, I called in my CFO. Pete Chin had been with me since my first government contract, and he knew how to move assets without leaving fingerprints. I need everything shifted to the contingency accounts we set up. Leave enough in the main accounts to look normal. Cassandra's normal. Pete nodded, already typing. The Cayman structure? No. Everything domestic, everything legal. When this hits, I want it clean enough for a congressional inquiry. What about the Boston Properties deal? Accelerated. I want the contract signed before she knows anything's wrong. Linda appeared in the doorway. Sir? Tommy Webster is here again. Says it's important. The kid burst in before I could respond, out of breath like he'd run all the way from school. Mr. Mitchell? The Range Rover guy? He was at your house again, but this time he went inside. My hand tightened on the desk edge. When, 20 minutes ago, Mom saw them leave together. Mrs. Mitchell was wearing that red dress, the one from the charity auction photo in your study. I checked my watch. 2:15 p.m. The Four Seasons would have their afternoon tea service starting now. Cassandra loved their scones. Always said they reminded her of her semester abroad in London. Thank you, Tommy. You're relieved of duty for today. I turned to Marcus. Give me everything on Hayes' schedule for the next month. Every event, every meeting, every client. You're not going to confront them? No. I pulled up the Boston social calendar on my screen. I'm going to let them keep digging their hole, but I need to know how deep it goes. Pete looked up from his laptop. The Boston Properties contracts just came in. Ready for your signature. I signed the documents, each stroke of the pen another piece moving into position. Cassandra had no idea that while she was having her afternoon tea, I was executing the largest real estate acquisition in the company's history. The deal would double our market value overnight. Linda, I called out. Get me Robert McKenzie on the phone. Tell him I've reconsidered his proposal about the merger. It was time to start converting my Queen's Gambit into checkmate. The merger announcement hit the business wires at exactly 9 a.m. Mitchell Consulting's acquisition of McKinsey International made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Cassandra didn't even look up from her breakfast when I set the paper down beside her coffee. You'll need to clear your schedule for next Friday, I said, pouring my coffee. The mayor's office is hosting a reception for the merger. She glanced up from her phone, surprise flickering across her face. I didn't know you were closing that deal so soon. Things accelerated unexpectedly. I watched her type something quickly on her phone, probably warning Hayes that his event planning services wouldn't be needed for this particular celebration. The next phase began that afternoon. Linda coordinated with the mayor's office while I met with Hayes' largest client, the Vincent Foundation. Their annual gala was Hayes' biggest remaining account. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Mr. Mitchell. Margaret Vincent, 70 and sharp as a tack, studied the financial documents I'd provided. Christopher assured us his company was financially stable. I'm only concerned about the foundation's reputation, Mrs. Vincent. My firm has handled enough charity events to know how quickly things can unravel when vendors overextend themselves. She closed the folder with a decisive snap. I'll have our board review this immediately. Though I must say, it's unusual for someone of your position to take such personal interest in our event planning. I've always believed in protecting valuable institutions, Mrs. Vincent. Back at the office, Marcus reported that Hayes was making panic calls to his investors. 3 had already pulled out after anonymous tips about his company's financial status. He's meeting Cassandra at the Four Seasons bar in an hour, Marcus said. Want me to have someone there? No need. I checked my watch. The Vincent Foundation board meets in 15 minutes. Let's see how he handles the news about losing his biggest account. Linda buzzed in. Sir, the mayor's office confirmed the guest list for Friday. They're adding the governor and 2 state senators. Perfect. Make sure the press release emphasizes the job creation aspects of the merger. The mayor will want that angle for his re-election campaign. I spent the next hour reviewing the prenup with Goldman. Cassandra's spending had accelerated over the past month. New clothes, spa treatments, a weekend retreat that coincided with Hayes' site visit to a potential new venue in the Berkshires. The credit card statements are gold, Goldman said, adding another tab to the evidence file. The timestamp on these charges puts them together at the Mandarin Oriental when she told you she was at her sister's. What about Hayes' finances? He's underwater. 3 months behind on his office lease, maxed out credit lines. The Vincent Foundation cancellation will be the final nail. My phone buzzed, Tommy's special ringtone. The text was typically direct. Our guy leaving Four Seasons. Looks mad. Mrs. M still inside. I pulled up the Four Seasons security feed on my laptop. A courtesy of their head of security, a former Army Ranger who'd served under me in Afghanistan. Cassandra sat alone at the bar, staring at her phone. Her hand shook slightly as she lifted her martini. Sir. Linda appeared in the doorway. The Boston Globe is asking for a comment about Hayes and Associates bankruptcy filing. No comment needed. But make sure Cassandra sees tomorrow's business section. Goldman gathered his papers. You're being remarkably thorough about this, Mitchell. Most men in your position would have gone for the dramatic confrontation weeks ago. I looked out at the Boston skyline, remembering countless military operations where patience had been the difference between victory and disaster. In my experience, counselor, the best victories are won before the enemy knows they're in a fight. My phone buzzed again. Cassandra, this time, can't make dinner tonight. Emergency board meeting about the children's hospital fundraiser. I texted back, no problem. Good luck with the meeting. Then I turned to Linda. Give me the Vincent Foundation on the phone. I believe they're looking for a new event planner for their annual gala. The pieces were in place. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Friday's reception, where Boston's entire social and business elite would witness the final move in this particular game of chess. The mayor's reception at the Boston Harbor Hotel had drawn every power player in the city. Cassandra wore the new Versace she bought for the occasion, black, elegant, and charged to the credit card I'd be canceling in approximately 2 hours. She worked the room like the professional socialite she'd become, air-kissing board members and complimenting their wives' jewelry. Marcus stood by the bar, his earpiece barely visible. Hayes just pulled up. Looks like he's been drinking. Let him in. I straightened my tie, checking my reflection in the window. Behind me, the harbor lights rippled like signal flares before an attack. Clayton. Robert McKenzie appeared at my elbow, whiskey in hand. Hell of a turnout. Governor's people are already talking about tax incentives for the merged operations. Excellent. Is everyone here? Full house. Even Margaret Vincent came, which is unusual for a business event. I nodded, watching Hayes enter the ballroom. His collar was slightly askew, his usual polished demeanor cracking around the edges. Cassandra saw him too. I caught the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the quick glance in my direction. Ladies and gentlemen. The mayor's voice cut through the crowd chatter. If I could have your attention. We're here tonight to celebrate not just a merger, but a vision for Boston's future. I tuned out the speech, focusing on Hayes as he made his way to the bar. 3 shots of bourbon in 5 minutes. Cassandra kept her distance, playing the dutiful wife as I accepted congratulations from the business community. The Vincent Foundation board members whispered among themselves, pointing discreetly at Hayes. And now, the mayor concluded, I'd like to invite Clayton Mitchell to say a few words. The podium felt familiar, like the command briefings I'd given in another life. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I discuss the merger, I'd like to address another matter of business integrity. I gestured to my assistant. Linda. The screens around the ballroom lit up with financial documents, text messages, hotel receipts. Hayes's face went from red to white. Cassandra's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. As many of you know, business success requires absolute trust. When that trust is violated, I changed the slide to Hayes and Associates bankruptcy filing. The consequences can be severe. Margaret Vincent stood up. Christopher, is this why you've been dodging my calls about the gala? Hayes stumbled forward. I can explain. The funding was just delayed. The funding was never there, I continued, my voice carrying across the now silent room. Just like you were never at a venue meeting in the Berkshires last month. A photo appeared on the screen. Hayes and Cassandra entering the Mandarin Oriental. You were using foundation events as cover for something else entirely. Cassandra started toward the exit. Marcus stepped into her path, holding up her phone. Found this in the ladies' room, ma'am. Lots of interesting messages about emergency board meetings. Clayton. Her voice shook slightly. This is absolutely inappropriate. I changed the slide again. Surveillance photos, text messages, hotel bills. Like using children's charity events to conduct your affair? The room erupted in whispers. The governor's wife covered her mouth in shock. Hayes lunged for the podium, but 2 of Marcus's men caught him smoothly, professionally. The same way they'd handled hostile assets in Fallujah. Get your hands off me. Hayes struggled against their grip. Cassandra, tell them. Tell them about how miserable you were with him, how controlling. Mrs. Mitchell appears to be leaving. Marcus's calm voice cut through Hayes's desperate shouts. Cassandra stood frozen by the door, her perfect socialite mask crumbling as her carefully constructed world collapsed around her. I turned back to the podium. Now, about the merger's impact on Boston's technology sector. The rest of the reception proceeded exactly according to plan. The governor praised our commitment to business ethics. Margaret Vincent personally thanked me for exposing Hayes before he could damage more charitable organizations. And Cassandra left in a taxi, alone, still clutching her champagne glass like a shield that had failed to protect her. The divorce proceedings took exactly 27 minutes. Cassandra's lawyer didn't even attempt to contest the prenup after Goldman presented the evidence packet. The judge's gavel echoed through the nearly empty courtroom like distant artillery fire. Clean, decisive, final. The house contents have been inventoried, Linda reported the next morning, setting a folder on my desk. Mrs. Mitchell, Ms. Cooper now, collected her personal items under supervision. The art appraiser comes tomorrow for the division of assets. I signed the last of the transfer papers without looking up. Status on Hayes? Filed Chapter 7 this morning. The Vincent Foundation hired a collection agency for the deposits he spent. His membership at the Union Club has been discontinued. Marcus arrived as Linda was leaving. He'd traded his usual suit for tactical gear. He had a private security operation to run in New Hampshire that afternoon. Hayes tried to get into the Four Seasons bar last night. They showed him the door. Cassandra, moving in with her sister in Wellesley. Her father's law firm rescinded her position on their charitable foundation board. Apparently, using children's charity events as cover for an affair didn't sit well with their corporate image. I turned to the window, watching a Coast Guard cutter slice through the harbor waters. The McKinsey merger closes today. Stock's up 12 points. Always did admire how you could fight a war and build an empire at the same time. Marcus checked his watch. Need anything else? No. But Marcus. I turned back to my desk. Thank you for having my back. Huh. He gave a slight nod and headed for the door. Some of us still live by a code. The next few weeks passed in a blur of merger integrations and expansion planning. The business press called it a masterful consolidation. The society pages ran a different kind of story, whispered rumors of affairs and financial scandals, of a prominent event planner's spectacular fall from grace. Cassandra's name appeared less and less frequently on charity boards and social registers. Tommy caught me one Saturday morning as I was heading to the gym. He'd grown 2 inches since this all began, but his shoelaces were still perpetually untied. Mr. Mitchell? Mom says I should stop surveillance operations now that the bad guys are gone. I couldn't help but smile. Mission accomplished, soldier. But keep those observation skills sharp. You've got good instincts. The following Monday, Linda brought in the morning papers with my coffee. Sir? The realtor called. The penthouse at Battery Wharf is yours if you want it. I studied the Boston skyline from my office window one last time. From up here, you could see all the way to Wellesley, where Cassandra was probably planning her social comeback. To the financial district, where Hayes was selling his Range Rover to pay legal fees. To the harbor, where my new penthouse awaited, closer to the office, with a better view for strategic planning. Book the movers, I told Linda. It's time for new territory. The phone rang, the governor's office. Something about sharing a commission on business ethics. I picked up the receiver, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Some men might have been broken by what happened. But in my world, victory wasn't about emotion. It was about strategy, precision, and the willingness to execute when the moment came. Governor, I said, I'd be honored to serve. 1 year to the day after the reception, I stood at my penthouse window watching the sun rise over Boston Harbor. The morning papers lay on my desk. McKinsey Mitchell International had just closed its 3rd major acquisition. Our stock had split twice since the merger. The Governor's Business Ethics Commission had given me a platform to reshape corporate governance across the state. Victory, as they say, has many fathers. Marcus's morning briefing arrived by encrypted email. Cassandra had finally given up on the Boston social scene after the last 3 charity boards rejected her applications. She'd taken a job selling condos in Providence, the kind of properties she used to turn her nose up at. Hayes was bartending at a dive bar in Revere, his event planning license suspended after the Vincent Foundation investigation. The Range Rover had been repossessed months ago. Mr. Mitchell, Linda's voice came through the intercom. Tommy Webster is here. Says you're expecting him. I smiled. The kid had traded his untied sneakers for polished Oxfords. The summer internship program had been his mother's idea, a way to channel those surveillance skills into a proper career path. Your security briefing is impressive, I told him, holding up his report. You've got a future in strategic analysis. Thank you, sir. He stood straighter, almost at attention. I learned from the best. The intercom buzzed again. Your 9 o'clock is here. The delegation from the Middle East Investment Fund. I straightened my tie, checking my reflection. The man in the mirror looked exactly like what he was, a victor who had turned betrayal into empire. Send them in. Tommy gathered his papers. Oh, Mr. Mitchell? I saw Miss Cooper yesterday, at the Dunkin' Donuts in Providence. She was putting up real estate flyers on the community board. And she looked small, like someone who'd lost a war she didn't even know she was fighting. I nodded, Turning back to the harbor view. The Coast Guard cutter was making its morning rounds, maintaining order in its designated territory. Everything in its proper place. Everything under control. That's the thing about strategy, Tommy, I said, watching the sun glint off the water like a victory flag. The best battles are won before the enemy knows they've lost.